Marcus Williams pushed his mop bucket down the empty hallway of Sterling Technologies, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence. It was 6 a.m., 2 hours before the first employees would arrive, and this was exactly how he liked it. The quiet gave him peace, a stark contrast to the chaos that had become his life outside these walls. At 42, Marcus had worked as a janitor at the tech company for 8 years. He knew every corner of the building, every stain that needed extra attention, every executive who dropped crumbs near their desk and never bothered to clean up, but none of them really knew him. To them, he was invisible, just the quiet man who emptied their trash bins and kept their offices spotless. What they didn't know was that Marcus had once been like them. He'd worn expensive suits, carried a briefcase, and made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. That was before the company he'd worked for went bankrupt, before his wife left him, and before he'd lost everything he thought mattered. The fall from grace had been swift and brutal, leaving him scrambling to find any work that would pay the bills. As he cleaned the CEO's office, Marcus noticed the family photos on the massive oak desk. Catherine Sterling looked happy in every picture. Vacations in Europe, family gatherings in what looked like a mansion, her children dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. He felt no bitterness toward her success. She'd built this company from nothing, and everyone knew she worked harder than anyone else in the building. The morning routine continued as usual. Marcus moved through each floor methodically, his mind often wandering to the problems waiting for him at home. His younger brother Daniel had been staying with him for 3 months now, ever since losing his job at the factory. Daniel's 2 kids, 8-year-old Maya and 6-year-old Connor, had been living with them too while their mother served overseas in the military. The rent on Marcus's small apartment was already a stretch on his janitor's salary, but feeding 4 people had become nearly impossible. He'd started skipping meals, telling the kids he'd eaten earlier or wasn't hungry. The children never questioned him. They trusted Uncle Marcus completely, not knowing that he often went to bed with his stomach growling so they could have seconds at dinner. As the morning wore on, employees began filtering into the building. The usual parade of polished shoes walked past Marcus as he worked, most people too busy with their phones or conversations to acknowledge his presence. He'd grown used to being overlooked, treated more like a piece of furniture than a human being. Some days he could work an entire shift without anyone saying a single word to him, beyond a grunt of acknowledgement. But Marcus had learned to find purpose in the small things. He took pride in leaving each office spotless, in making sure the bathrooms were always stocked with supplies, in keeping the common areas welcoming for everyone who worked there. His work mattered even if no one noticed. It was honest work. And after everything he'd been through, that meant something. The day shift supervisor, Janet, barely looked up from her clipboard when Marcus clocked out at 2 p.m. His official shift was over, but Marcus had started staying later recently. He'd discovered that the company cafeteria threw away perfectly good food every afternoon. Sandwiches that were a day old, fruit that was slightly too ripe, packaged snacks nearing their expiration date. The manager had given him permission to take what would otherwise go in the dumpster, and it had become a lifeline for his struggling household. Today's haul was particularly good. 3 turkey sandwiches still in their wrapping, a bag of apples with just a few soft spots, and several packages of crackers. It wasn't gourmet food, but it would mean Maya and Connor could have proper lunches tomorrow instead of the watery soup he'd been stretching for 3 days. As Marcus packed the food into his worn backpack, he thought about the conversation he'd overheard in the elevator that morning. 2 executives discussing their weekend plans, expensive dinners, Broadway shows, shopping trips that would cost more than his monthly salary. He didn't resent their wealth, but sometimes the contrast between their world and his felt overwhelming. Walking toward the exit, Marcus passed the framed company values hanging in the lobby. Words like integrity, community, and making a difference were displayed in elegant script. He wondered if the people who wrote those values had ever experienced real hunger, ever had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, ever felt the weight of other people depending on them when they had nothing left to give. The afternoon sun felt warm on his face as he stepped outside, a small comfort in what had become a daily struggle for survival. Tomorrow would bring another early morning, another day of invisible work in a world that seemed designed to overlook people like him. But tonight, Maya and Connor would have full bellies, and sometimes that felt like the most important victory of all. Marcus didn't know that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. He had no idea that his simple acts of love and sacrifice were about to be witnessed by the one person who had the power to transform everything. All he knew was that he had children to feed and responsibilities to meet, one day at a time. Catherine Sterling had built her empire on attention to detail and never missed anything that happened in her building. As CEO of Sterling Technologies, she made it her business to know every aspect of her company, from the biggest contracts down to the smallest operational details. But lately something had been nagging at her, and she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. It started 3 weeks ago during one of her late evening walks through the office floors. Catherine often stayed past regular business hours, reviewing reports and planning strategies for the company's continued growth. During these quiet evening hours, she'd begun noticing Marcus Williams, the janitor who worked the day shift but seemed to linger long after his official hours ended. At first, she thought nothing of it. Dedicated employees often worked extra hours, though she'd never seen a janitor stay voluntarily beyond their shift. But Marcus was different. He moved through the building with a quiet efficiency that impressed her, and unlike many service workers she'd encountered, he took genuine pride in his work. The offices were always immaculate, the bathrooms spotless, and somehow he managed to clean around busy employees without ever interrupting their workflow. What caught Catherine's attention wasn't just his work ethic, it was the way he carried himself. Marcus moved with the posture and measured pace of someone who had once held responsibility and authority. She'd seen that bearing in countless boardrooms, and it seemed oddly out of place in someone emptying trash bins and mopping floors. Her curiosity deepened when she started paying closer attention to his after-hours activities. Marcus would disappear into the cafeteria area around 2:30 p.m. each day, spending time talking with the food service manager. Catherine had assumed he was simply being friendly, but when she casually asked the cafeteria manager about it, the response surprised her. "Oh, Marcus, he's been helping us reduce food waste," the manager explained. "We used to throw away so much perfectly good food every day. Sandwiches, fruit, packaged items that were still fresh but couldn't be served the next day." Marcus asked if he could take some of it, rather than see it go to waste. "Honestly, it's been great for our sustainability numbers." The explanation made sense, but something about it bothered Catherine. She'd implemented generous employee meal programs and competitive salaries throughout the company. Why would a full-time employee need to rely on leftover cafeteria food? She made a mental note to review the compensation packages for the cleaning and maintenance staff. When HR pulled Marcus's employment file, Catherine discovered several surprising details. His application showed a college education and previous management experience, though the companies listed were either out of business or had no record of employment verification. His salary was competitive for janitorial work, but Catherine realized that for someone supporting a family, it might still be a struggle. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon when Catherine decided to leave work early for a doctor's appointment. As her driver pulled out of the executive parking garage, she spotted Marcus walking toward the city bus stop, his backpack bulging with what she now knew was cafeteria overflow. Instead of heading straight to her appointment, she found herself telling her driver to follow the bus route. Marcus got off in one of the city's most struggling neighborhoods, an area Catherine knew primarily from charity reports and urban development studies. The buildings were old and worn, many storefronts were empty, and the few children she saw playing in the streets looked like they could use better clothing and more nutritious meals. She watched Marcus walk into a small apartment building that had seen better decades. The discovery that her dedicated janitor was living in poverty while maintaining such dignity and work ethic at the office moved her in ways she hadn't expected. Catherine had grown up wealthy, attended the best schools, and built her company with the advantage of family connections and initial capital. She'd worked hard for her success, but she'd never had to wonder where her next meal would come from. That evening, Catherine found herself unable to focus on the quarterly reports waiting on her desk. Instead, she kept thinking about Marcus Williams and the quiet grace with which he handled what must be incredible financial pressure. She'd seen plenty of employees complain about minor inconveniences. The coffee in the break room wasn't their preferred brand. The air conditioning was too cold, The parking spaces weren't close enough to the building entrance. Yet here was a man facing real hardship, who came to work every day with a positive attitude and impeccable performance. Catherine began paying closer attention to Marcus during her evening office walks. She noticed that he took special care with the children's artwork displayed in the employee break room, from the company's recent Bring Your Kids to Work Day. He would carefully dust around each drawing, making sure none were damaged or displaced. When someone's lunch spilled in the microwave, he cleaned it thoroughly without complaint, even though it wasn't technically part of his responsibilities. Most telling was an incident she witnessed the following week. A young employee had been crying in one of the conference rooms after what was clearly a difficult phone call. Marcus, who had been cleaning nearby, quietly brought her a box of tissues and a cup of water without saying a word. He simply placed them on the table near her and continued his work, giving her privacy while showing quiet compassion. The more Catherine observed, the more she realized that Marcus Williams wasn't just a janitor. He was someone who brought dignity, kindness, and genuine care to every interaction. Despite facing his own significant challenges, she began to wonder about his story, about how someone with his obvious character and work ethic had ended up in such financial difficulty. Her executive assistant noticed her distraction during meetings. "Ms. Sterling, you seem preoccupied lately. Is everything all right?" Catherine realized she'd been thinking about Marcus even during important business discussions. "I'm fine, Sarah, just evaluating some personnel matters," but she wasn't fine. Something about Marcus Williams had gotten under her skin in a way that surprised her. She'd built her company on the principle that everyone deserved dignity and opportunity, yet somehow she'd failed to notice that one of her most dedicated employees was struggling just to survive. The realization that she might have been blind to similar situations among other staff members troubled her deeply. The discovery that would change everything came on a rainy Friday afternoon in November. Catherine had stayed late to finish reviewing budget proposals, and as she finally prepared to leave around 6 p.m., she realized she'd left her reading glasses in the conference room on the 15th floor. The building felt eerily quiet as she rode the elevator up, with most employees long gone for the weekend. As the elevator doors opened, Catherine heard voices coming from the conference room she needed to visit. She paused, recognizing Marcus's gentle tone, mixed with the higher-pitched voices of children. Curious and slightly concerned about security protocols, she moved quietly toward the sound. What she saw through the glass conference room doors stopped her in her tracks. Marcus sat at the large mahogany table with two children, a girl who looked about 8 and a boy who appeared younger. They were sharing sandwiches and fruit that Catherine recognized as items from the cafeteria's daily surplus. But this wasn't just a quick meal. Marcus had turned it into something special. He'd arranged the simple food on real plates from the office kitchenette, complete with napkins and cups of water and actual glasses instead of disposable cups. The children were chatting excitedly about their day at school, while Marcus listened with the kind of focused attention that children crave, but don't always receive from the adults in their lives. "Uncle Marcus, Mrs. Peterson said my math test was really good," the little girl was saying, her face beaming with pride. She wrote excellent work at the top in red ink. "That's wonderful, Maya," Marcus replied, his face lighting up with genuine joy. "I knew all that practice would pay off. What about you, Connor? How was your day?" The younger boy, who had been quietly eating his sandwich, suddenly became animated. "We learned about butterflies today. Did you know some butterflies can fly thousands of miles? The teacher said they're stronger than they look." Marcus nodded seriously as if this information was the most important thing he'd heard all day. "That's amazing, buddy. Sometimes the smallest creatures are the most incredible, aren't they?" Catherine found herself frozen in the hallway, witnessing an intimate family moment that revealed so much about Marcus Williams that she'd never suspected. These weren't his children. She could see the family resemblance was slight, but his love for them was unmistakable. Every gesture, every word, every moment of attention he gave them spoke of a man who put these children's well-being above everything else in his life. As she watched, Marcus began helping the children with their homework. He pulled out worn schoolwork sheets from his backpack and spread them on the conference table. The girl, Maya, was working on reading comprehension while the boy, Connor, was practicing basic addition. Marcus moved between them patiently, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. "Remember what we talked about, Maya," he said softly. "When you come to a word you don't know, Try to sound it out first. If that doesn't work, look at the other words around it for clues about what it might mean. Catherine noticed that the children's school clothes were clean but worn, clearly hand-me-downs that had seen better days. Their backpacks were old and patched in several places, yet they seemed happy and well cared for, radiating the kind of security that comes from knowing they are loved and protected, even if their material circumstances were limited. What struck Catherine most was the makeshift nature of this after-school routine. Marcus had obviously been bringing the children to the office regularly, using the empty conference room as a temporary homework center and dining room. He'd found ways to make a sterile, corporate space feel warm and welcoming for two young children who needed supervision and care after school. The conversation continued as Marcus helped Connor with a particularly challenging math problem. Let's think about this together, buddy. If you have 3 apples and someone gives you 2 more, how many do you have altogether? Connor counted carefully on his fingers, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. 5. That's exactly right, Marcus said, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. You're getting so good at this. Catherine realized she was witnessing something remarkable. Marcus wasn't just feeding hungry children. He was providing them with stability, educational support, and emotional nurturing during what was clearly a difficult period in their young lives. This wasn't charity or obligation. This was love in action, demonstrated by a man who had very little to give but gave it freely anyway. As the children finished their homework, Maya looked up at Marcus with obvious concern. Uncle Marcus, you didn't eat very much of your sandwich? Marcus smiled gently and pushed the remaining half of his sandwich toward her. I'm not very hungry tonight, sweetheart. Would you like to finish it for me? Growing girls need lots of good food. Maya accepted the sandwich gratefully, but Catherine caught the quick look of adult worry that crossed the 8-year-old's face. Even at her young age, Maya seemed to understand more about their family's financial struggles than Marcus realized. Children often picked up on things that adults thought they were hiding. The scene continued for another 20 minutes as Marcus helped the children pack up their school supplies and prepare to leave. He checked their homework one more time, made sure they had everything they needed for the weekend, and listened patiently to their plans for Saturday morning cartoons and a trip to the park. Will you come to the park with us tomorrow, Uncle Marcus? Connor asked hopefully. I'll try, buddy, Marcus replied. I might have to work a few extra hours tomorrow, but we'll see what we can do. Catherine watched as Marcus gathered the plates and glasses, carefully washing them in the small conference room sink and putting everything back exactly where he'd found it. He was meticulous about leaving no trace of their presence, obviously concerned about maintaining his job and not wanting to abuse the privilege of using company space. As the small family prepared to leave, Catherine quietly stepped back into the elevator alcove, not wanting to intrude on their privacy or potentially embarrass Marcus by revealing that she'd witnessed this intimate scene. But as the elevator doors closed and she rode back down to her office, her mind was racing with questions and realizations that would keep her awake for most of the night. Catherine couldn't sleep that night. The image of Marcus carefully sharing his meager meal with 2 children haunted her thoughts, along with the realization that this scene had probably been playing out in her building for weeks or months without her knowledge. By 3 a.m., she'd given up on rest and was sitting in her home office, researching everything she could find about childhood hunger and poverty in her city. The statistics were sobering. 1 in 4 children in their metropolitan area experienced food insecurity. Many relied on free school meals during the week, leaving weekends and school holidays as periods of particular hardship. Catherine had donated to food banks and children's charities for years, but seeing the issue up close through Marcus's situation made it feel urgent and personal in a way that charitable giving never had. Saturday morning brought no relief from her racing thoughts. Catherine found herself driving to the office, something she rarely did on weekends. She told herself she needed to catch up on paperwork, but truthfully, she was hoping to learn more about Marcus's situation. The building was nearly empty, with only security guards and a skeleton maintenance crew present. She made her way to Human Resources, using her executive access to review Marcus's employment file more thoroughly. What she discovered painted a picture of quiet resilience that impressed her even more. His emergency contact was listed as Daniel Williams, presumably his brother, with an address in the same struggling neighborhood she'd seen Marcus enter. His employment history showed steady work but increasingly modest positions over the past decade. Most telling were his attendance records, Marcus had perfect punctuality and had never taken a single sick day in 8 years of employment. Even more remarkably, he'd never used any of his vacation time. Catherine realized that Marcus couldn't afford to miss work, and every day's pay was essential for his family's survival. Monday morning arrived with Catherine feeling determined to understand more about the situation before taking any action. She didn't want to embarrass Marcus or jeopardize his job, but she also couldn't ignore what she'd witnessed. She decided to start by having casual conversations with other employees who might interact with Marcus regularly. The cafeteria manager, Janet Rodriguez, was happy to share her observations. "Marcus is wonderful," she said enthusiastically. "Always polite, always grateful for the food that would otherwise go to waste. I don't know his personal situation, but I get the impression he's helping feed more people than just himself. He's very thoughtful about taking items that would work well for children, things like peanut butter sandwiches, fruit cups, crackers." The security supervisor had similar praise. "Marcus is one of our most reliable contractors. Never any issues, always professional. I've noticed he sometimes brings children with him when he works late. I assume they're family members. They're very well behaved, and he keeps them in the conference room so they don't disturb anyone or get in the way." Each conversation confirmed Catherine's growing understanding that Marcus was shouldering significant family responsibilities with remarkable grace and dignity, but it also revealed that his situation was more precarious than she'd initially realized. If he was bringing children to work regularly, it meant he had no other childcare options and was trying to balance multiple competing priorities. Tuesday brought the breakthrough Catherine had been hoping for. She deliberately stayed late again, positioning herself to naturally encounter Marcus during his extended hours. Around 6:15 p.m., she heard familiar voices from the same conference room and decided to approach directly rather than observe from a distance. She knocked gently on the conference room door, and the conversation inside immediately stopped. Marcus opened the door, his expression showing surprise and concern at seeing the CEO standing in the hallway. "Ms. Sterling," he said quickly, his voice tense with worry. "I'm sorry, I was just finishing up some cleaning in here. These are my niece and nephew, Maya and Connor. Their father, my brother, is looking for work, and their mother is deployed overseas. I know I probably shouldn't have them here, but their school has an early dismissal today, and I didn't want to leave them unsupervised." Catherine could see the fear in his eyes, fear that he was about to lose the job. That was clearly essential to his family's survival. Maya and Connor had frozen at their homework, sensing the adult tension in the room even if they didn't understand its source. "Actually, Marcus, I was hoping I could speak with you," Catherine said gently. "Would it be possible for us to talk privately for a few minutes? Perhaps the children could continue their homework while we step into the hallway." Marcus nodded nervously, clearly expecting the worst. He turned to the children with a forced smile. "Uncle Marcus needs to talk with Ms. Sterling for just a minute. Keep working on your math problems, okay? I'll be right back." In the hallway, Catherine could see that Marcus was bracing himself for termination. His shoulders were tense, and he kept glancing back toward the conference room where the children waited. "Marcus, I want you to know that you're not in trouble," Catherine began, watching relief flood his features. "In fact, I've been impressed by your work ethic and dedication to this company. But I've also noticed that you often work beyond your scheduled hours, and I wanted to understand if there were additional responsibilities you'd like to take on that might provide some extra income." Marcus looked surprised by the direction of the conversation. "Ms. Sterling, I appreciate the job I have. I don't want to ask for anything more than what I've already been given." "That's exactly why I want to have this conversation," Catherine replied. "In my experience, the people who ask for the least often deserve the most. I've observed your work, and I think you're overqualified for your current position. I'd like to learn more about your background and discuss some possibilities that might be mutually beneficial." For the first time since she'd knocked on the conference room door, Marcus's expression showed a glimmer of hope mixed with disbelief. "I don't understand, Ms. Sterling. Are you offering me a different job?" "I'm offering to have a conversation," Catherine said carefully. "But first, I'd like to know more about your situation. Those children clearly mean a lot to you, and it's obvious you're doing everything you can to take care of them. I respect that kind of dedication, both to family and to work." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. Finally, he seemed to make a decision. "Maya and Connor are my brother Daniel's children. He lost his job 3 months ago and their mother is serving in Afghanistan. I'm the only family they have available right now. I know bringing them here isn't ideal, but I couldn't afford after-school care, and I didn't want them home alone. What about Daniel? Is he unable to watch them? Marcus hesitated, clearly uncomfortable discussing family challenges with his CEO. Daniel is going through a difficult time. Losing his job hit him hard, and he's struggling with some personal issues. The children are better off with me right now. Catherine nodded, understanding that Marcus was carefully avoiding details that might reflect poorly on his brother, while still explaining the essential facts. The picture was becoming clearer. Marcus was essentially raising 2 children on a janitor's salary, while supporting an unemployed brother who was dealing with his own problems. The conversation that followed changed both of their lives forever. Catherine invited Marcus to her office the next morning, arranging for a colleague to watch Maya and Connor in the employee break room with coloring books and snacks. What she learned about Marcus Williams in that hour-long discussion revealed a story of resilience, sacrifice, and quiet heroism that would stay with her for years. Marcus had indeed been an executive. Once, a regional operations manager for a mid-sized manufacturing company that went bankrupt during the economic downturn 8 years earlier. He'd lost not just his job but his entire career trajectory when the industry consolidated, and most of his professional contacts disappeared along with their companies. His wife, unable to handle the dramatic lifestyle change and financial stress, had left him just 6 months after he lost his position. I spent 2 years trying to get back into management, Marcus explained, his voice quiet but steady. I sent out hundreds of resumes, went on dozens of interviews. But when you've been unemployed for more than a year, people start to wonder what's wrong with you. When the cleaning position opened up here, I took it because I needed work, and I've tried to be grateful for it ever since. Catherine listened without interrupting as Marcus shared the details of his brother Daniel's situation. Daniel had served 2 tours in Iraq before coming home to work at a manufacturing plant. When the plant closed, he'd struggled to find new employment and had begun drinking heavily. His wife's deployment had coincided with his job loss, leaving him unable to care for Maya and Connor adequately. They're good kids, Marcus said, his face softening when he talked about his niece and nephew. Maya is incredibly bright. She reads at a level 2 grades above her age. Connor is quieter, but he has this amazing curiosity about everything. They deserve better than what I can give them right now, but I'm doing my best. Catherine had come into the meeting with a plan, but hearing Marcus's full story convinced her that her initial ideas weren't ambitious enough. This wasn't just about helping one employee. It was about recognizing that talent and character could be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes the most valuable people in an organization were the ones who went unnoticed. Marcus, I have a proposition for you, Catherine said, leaning forward in her chair. But before I make it, I want you to know that your current job is secure regardless of your answer. You've proven yourself to be reliable, trustworthy, and dedicated, and you'll always have a place here. Marcus nodded, though his expression remained cautious. 8 years of financial struggle had taught him to be wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. Our facilities management department has been looking for someone to oversee operations for all our office locations, Catherine continued. It's a supervisory role that would involve coordinating maintenance, security, and building services across 5 buildings. The position requires someone who understands the practical aspects of building operations but also has the management experience to supervise staff and coordinate with vendors. Marcus's eyes widened as he began to understand what Catherine was suggesting. Ms. Sterling, I appreciate the thought, but I don't have a college degree from a prestigious school or recent management experience. Your other supervisors have credentials I don't have. What you have is 8 years of first-hand experience with every aspect of building operations, a work ethic that's second to none, and the kind of character that can't be taught in business school, Catherine replied. You've been managing resources, solving problems, and taking care of people's needs every day. The fact that you've been doing it quietly and without recognition doesn't make it less valuable. The salary Catherine proposed was more than triple what Marcus was earning as a janitor, enough to move his family to a better neighborhood and provide Maya and Connor with opportunities he'd only dreamed of giving them. But more than the money, it was the recognition and respect implied by the offer that moved him most. There's one more thing, Catherine added. The position comes with a comprehensive benefits package, including health insurance and an education fund. If you're interested, the company would also pay for you to complete an MBA program part-time over the next few years. I believe in investing in people who have proven themselves. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling to process an opportunity that would transform his family's circumstances overnight. Catherine could see the cautious hope warring with disbelief in his expression. Why? He finally asked. Why would you take such a risk on someone like me? Catherine had been expecting this question and had thought carefully about her answer. Marcus, I've built this company by recognizing talent and character wherever I find it. Some of my best managers started in entry-level positions and worked their way up. But more than that, I believe that people who faced real adversity often develop qualities that can't be taught. Resilience, empathy, resourcefulness, and an understanding of what really matters. She paused, thinking about the scene she'd witnessed in the conference room. I've watched you turn a simple cafeteria meal into something special for 2 children. I've seen you take pride in work that others might consider beneath them. I've observed the way other employees respond to your quiet kindness and professionalism. Those aren't skills you learn in a classroom. They're character traits that are developed through experience and choice. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, clearly emotional at the recognition and opportunity he'd never expected. Ms. Sterling, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever hoped for. Say you'll consider it, Catherine replied. Take the weekend to think it over. Discuss it with your family. But Marcus, I want you to know that I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you an opportunity because I believe you'll excel in this role and bring value to the company. As Marcus left Catherine's office that day, both of them knew that this conversation represented far more than a job promotion. It was a recognition that worth and potential weren't always found in the most obvious places, and that sometimes the most extraordinary people were those who quietly did extraordinary things without seeking recognition or reward. The ripple effects of Catherine's decision would extend far beyond Marcus and his family, inspiring a company-wide initiative to look more carefully at the talents and potential of every employee, regardless of their current position or background. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood in his new office on the 20th floor of Sterling Technologies, looking out over the city's skyline that had once seemed so far beyond his reach. The view was spectacular, but what filled him with the most satisfaction was the knowledge that Maya and Connor were thriving in their new school just a few miles away, no longer worried about whether there would be enough food for dinner. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Taking on a management role after 8 years of working alone required Marcus to rebuild skills he'd thought were lost forever. He'd had to learn new technologies, update his understanding of corporate processes, and most difficult of all, overcome the imposter syndrome that whispered he didn't belong in meetings with executives and department heads. Catherine had been instrumental in his success, pairing him with a mentor and ensuring he had the support needed to excel in his new role. But it was Marcus's own determination and the trust his team quickly developed in his leadership that made the promotion truly successful. His years of hands-on experience with building operations gave him insights that proved invaluable in his supervisory role. The changes in Marcus's personal life had been even more dramatic. He'd moved Maya, Connor, and Daniel to a 3-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood with good schools and safe parks. Daniel, inspired by his brother's transformation and with access to better resources for dealing with his struggles, had entered a rehabilitation program and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with his children. Maya was excelling in her new school's gifted program, her natural intelligence finally being challenged and nurtured in ways that had been impossible when Marcus was stretched thin trying to provide basic necessities. Connor had joined the school's soccer team and was displaying a confidence and joy that had been muted during their difficult period. But perhaps the most meaningful change was less visible. Marcus carried himself differently now, not with arrogance or entitlement, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his worth was recognized and valued. The gratitude he felt toward Catherine and Sterling Technologies had translated into an even deeper commitment to excellence in service. The facilities management team Marcus now supervised had grown from a group of individual contractors into a cohesive department that took pride in maintaining Sterling's reputation for operational excellence. Marcus's background as a janitor gave him credibility with the frontline staff that other supervisors might have struggled to achieve. They knew he understood their work because he'd done it himself, and they respected his leadership because it was based on experience rather than theory. One afternoon, Catherine stopped by Marcus's office to review quarterly operational reports. The numbers were impressive. Maintenance costs down 15%, employee satisfaction with building services up significantly, and several innovative efficiency improvements that were saving the company substantial amounts of money annually. Marcus, I have to admit, even I didn't anticipate how transformative your leadership would be for this department, Catherine said, reviewing the quarterly report spread across his desk. These efficiency improvements you've implemented are remarkable. Marcus smiled, pointing to a chart showing reduced energy costs across all 5 buildings. When you've worked nights and weekends in these buildings for years, you notice things that others might miss. Simple changes like adjusting cleaning schedules to optimize heating and cooling systems, or repositioning equipment to reduce wear and tear. They add up to significant savings. What impressed Catherine most wasn't just the financial results, but the culture Marcus had built within his department. Employee turnover had dropped to nearly zero, and she regularly heard positive feedback about the facility's staff from employees throughout the company. Marcus had created an environment where every team member felt valued and took pride in their contribution to the company's success. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Maya peeked her head in, her school backpack slung over her shoulder and a bright smile on her face. At 9 years old, she had grown more confident and outgoing in the months since their family's circumstances had stabilized. Uncle Marcus, I finished my homework early and Mrs. Chen said I could come visit you before you finish work, she announced. Then noticed Catherine and offered a polite wave. Hello, Miss Sterling. Hello, Maya, Catherine replied warmly. How's school going? Really good. I'm in the advanced reading group now and my teacher says I might be able to skip ahead in math next year. Maya's pride in her academic achievements was evident, and Catherine could see how much Marcus's sacrifice and love had contributed to nurturing this bright young girl's potential. Connor appeared in the doorway moments later, slightly out of breath from running to catch up with his sister. At 7, he was still shy around adults he didn't know well, but he waved politely at Catherine before heading straight to Marcus for a hug. Watching this simple family interaction, Catherine was struck by how much had changed since that evening 6 months ago, when she'd first witnessed Marcus sharing his meager meal with these children in a conference room. The love and dedication had remained constant, but now it was supported by stability and resources that allowed all of them to flourish. We should probably head home so you can start dinner, Marcus said to the children, then turned to Catherine. Would you like to join us? It's nothing fancy, but Sarah, that's Daniel's wife. She returned from deployment last month. She's been teaching the kids to make homemade pizza on Fridays. The invitation surprised Catherine, but the genuine warmth behind it moved her. In her executive role, most social invitations felt formal or strategic. This was simply a family asking her to share a meal, and she found herself accepting without hesitation. 2 hours later, Catherine sat around a modest dining table in Marcus's apartment, sharing pizza and laughter with a family that had taught her profound lessons about resilience, love, and the importance of seeing potential in unexpected places. Daniel, clean and sober for 4 months now, was helping Connor with a puzzle while Sarah and Maya discussed the book Maya was reading. As the evening wound down and Catherine prepared to leave, Marcus walked her to her car. The neighborhood, while not wealthy, felt safe and hopeful in a way that spoke to the power of stable families and community investment. Catherine, Marcus said, using her first name as she'd insisted he do outside of work. I know I've thanked you before, but I need you to understand what you've given us. It's not just the job or the money, though those things changed everything. It's the dignity. It's knowing that someone saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Marcus, I need you to understand something too, Catherine replied. What I gave you was an opportunity. What you've done with it, the leadership you've shown, the results you've achieved, the way you've lifted up everyone around you, that's all you. I simply recognized what was already there. As Catherine drove home that night, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with her curiosity about a quiet janitor who worked longer hours than required, The decision to promote Marcus had rippled through the entire company, inspiring other managers to look more carefully at the potential within their teams and leading to several other remarkable success stories. But more than the business benefits, Catherine knew that witnessing Marcus's transformation had changed her own perspective on leadership and success. She'd learned that the most valuable employees weren't always the ones with the most impressive resumes, but often the ones who brought character, dedication, and heart to everything they did. The following Monday, Catherine announced a new company initiative, a comprehensive program to identify and develop internal talent at every level of the organization. The program would provide educational opportunities, mentorship, and pathways for advancement based on performance and potential rather than traditional credentials. In her announcement to the company, Catherine shared the story of Marcus Williams, with his permission, as an example of the extraordinary talent that could be found within their own walls. She spoke about the importance of looking beyond job titles and degrees to recognize the character, work ethic, and potential that might be quietly demonstrated by any employee, at any level. Marcus Williams had started as the quiet janitor who nobody noticed, but his story became a company legend that inspired countless others to pursue their own paths of growth and contribution. Most importantly, it reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with the simple act of really seeing the people around us and recognizing the potential that exists in every human being willing to work with dedication and heart. Years later, when Maya graduated as valedictorian of her high school class and Connor earned a full scholarship to study engineering, they would both credit their Uncle Marcus not just for providing for them during their most difficult time, but for showing them that circumstances don't define potential and that with hard work and the support of people who believe in you, any dream is possible. And Catherine Sterling, successful CEO and business leader, would always remember that some of her most important lessons about leadership came not from boardrooms or business schools, but from observing a janitor quietly feeding hungry children and turning that simple act of love into an extraordinary example of human dignity and hope.